So today's video is going to be Mistborn versus Stormlight, part one of many. I'm not quite sure how many of these I'm going to do, but recently over on my Instagram stories, I asked over 30 questions comparing different aspects of Stormlight to different aspects of Mistborn. The various different questions tended to be within categories, so one of them was characters, which is what we're going to be diving into today. One obvious thing to note is that Stormlight Archive's first arc, of course, is not completed, whereas Mistborn First Era is. So in that way, you could argue that Mistborn has an advantage over Stormlight, but I find the fact that Stormlight was written later in Sanderson's career and is still being written later in Sanderson's career gives it an advantage because he's a much more polished writer. He seems to definitely know his own voice. This is something that he's been wanting to write for so long. It's like his masterpiece. So I think in that way, Stormlight and Mistborn, they balance out. But one fun thing will be to come back to some of these questions later when we do have that first arc completed and see how different the answers will be. That day, of course, will come. Jumping into these ones, though, and keeping it non-spoiler for those of you who have not read through all of both. The first one we have involving characters is which series, just in general, has better main characters. 23% of you said Mistborn and 77% said Stormlight. There are, I would say, two main characters in Mistborn, which would be Vin and then Kelsier, arguably another character. Because I'm keeping this non-spoiler, I don't want to say, but you could argue that there's potentially three main characters in Mistborn, whereas in Stormlight you have Kaladin, Dalinar, and Shallan. And I think that there's just so much more page time to dedicate to getting to know these characters that you inevitably are going to find yourself more drawn to them. They're going to feel more real, and especially because there's such an emphasis on diving into these characters, diving into their trauma, diving into their past. There's such an emphasis in Stormlight. But at the same time, if I'm just comparing Vin to Kaladin, this becomes so much more difficult of a question. I love both these characters so much. I think I gotta go with Kaladin, but oh my gosh, do I love Vin so much. I love Vin so much. I know a lot of other people, though, definitely like Kaladin more than Vin. A lot of people find Vin really boring, where Kaladin is just so compelling. The depression that he endures is so relatable, not even just for people that experience depression, but also I think it opens up what depression is really like. There are a lot of people that maybe even get frustrated reading about Kaladin's depression, but that frustration, I feel like, is also accurate because it's a frustrating thing. Depression can be really aggravating. It makes you question yourself. It makes you question everything. It makes you question your worth. And then when you are not doing enough on top of that, when you kind of have that hero complex where you feel like you have to be saving everybody at all times, I just think that Kaladin is a wonderful character. And on top of all that, as far as heroes go, Kaladin is kind of your classic underdog. Oh my goodness. Seeing where he starts and the way that he finds hope, not only just with his situation and what's going on in Stormlight, because this is a character who's a slave, so not only is he finding hope with that, but then hope to persevere even through all of his the things that he has to fight through mentally. He is just such an inspiring character. I love him so much. Vin is very different in that her trauma, I feel like, causes her to not reach out to others. She's a character that what makes her so powerful to me is that she sort of has no reason to care. The world has been very cruel to her, which is similar with Kaladin. Man, this whole video is going to be Vin versus Kaladin. I need to focus it here. But Vin, to me, is somebody who, she was not raised to have compassion for other people. She was kind of raised to see the world as a terrible place. And it is a terrible place, and it has shown her nothing but atrocities. And where Kaladin has had some of that same thing, he also has people in his life early on that were so loving and supportive of him, whereas Vin didn't have that. And she has no reason then to care about the fate of the world and the well-being of other people, but she does anyway. And that's part of what I think is so amazing about Vin. But I do think that Kaladin's perhaps a little bit, the better character as far as how it's written. I love both of them so much. They're not real, but I feel like I'm hurting someone's feelings right now. And then Dalinar and Kelsier, I would say, are a little bit more closely related as far as they're really not alike in personality, but as far as being more morally gray than perhaps Kaladin. Kaladin's a little bit, he's just a really good guy. And Dalinar is so fascinating to dissect because his backstory is Oh man, so intense. And you also get glimpses of this all the time, that he's this changed man, but you're like, well, what was he like before? I want to know what he was like before. And he's so intriguing. And I think Kelsier is very intriguing as well, except for he's more like what you think initially is our classic hero, and then you're like, wait a second, maybe not. This guy's got some issues, and he's very hateful. And it's just, I mean, none of these characters are exactly alike. I'm just kind of trying to, I mean, it'd be weird to compare Vin to Dalinar. Maybe not. Maybe you think they'd be more closely related. But then the other two characters, we have one, again, I don't really want to say because I don't want to spoil any of how things go down in the first book, but the other character that you could argue is a main character in Mistborn, comparing them to Shallan. Once again, Shallan is just, whether you love her or hate her, she's fascinating. And once again, Sanderson does an amazing job of diving into mental health. And with her particular backstory as well, it is so dark and so alarming. Whereas the other character, you like hear about stuff and you're like, if I really think about it, you probably did have a terrible, terrible childhood, especially given the people that were in your life. But you're not quite as interesting to dive into. But once again, I think that this kind of comes down to we just have more time with the characters. But man, do I love those Mistborn characters anyway. But I do have to agree with all of you. I'm in agreement. I think Stormlight overall is better main character. This next one I call major BS. The question is, which series has better romantic relationships? And 52% of you said Mistborn and 48% said Stormlight. And I do not feel like it should be that close. Mistborn, okay, neither of them have great romances, but Mistborn's is better, in my opinion. So I'm with the majority, but the majority, there should have been more of you, in my opinion. So Stormlight, okay, again, I can't get into spoilers, but there are two characters who, in the first Stormlight book, Way of Kings, their whole thing is basically like, woman, stay away from me. And then it's like, I love you, though. and then like, that's like the height of their pining for each other. And then there's another set of characters whose relationship I can't stand. And a lot of people think they're very cute. I cannot stand them. I find them really aggravating, and they're a younger couple, and there's another character at one point that's like, I don't mind each of them individually, but together they're kind of like, ugh. And I'm like, yeah, man, me too. I think that too. And that's my thoughts about the romances. There's an intriguing romance in Rhythm of War that pops up where it's like, I wouldn't have called that, but okay. And that's probably my favorite one. But anyway, so there's that. And then in Mistborn, there's a very notable relationship throughout the trilogy, and I go back and forth between hating that romance and loving that romance because there's so many things within that are more thematic that I absolutely love explored with those characters, the main romance anyway. I love those themes that are explored. I love the way they have to learn to trust one another, and the fact that they put their feelings second to kind of the fate of the world. And I love that in books. I love when characters have to make those difficult decisions. But at the same time, as far as the chemistry between the characters, I'm like, do you guys smooch ever? Do you smooch ever? Because maybe every now and then they would smooch, but like it didn't even feel like there was any passion behind the smooch, you know? So as far as like the passion goes, it's not really there. It's kind of dry in that regard. And I'm not saying I need like these detailed saucy scenes, but I'm like a little bit of something. There are characters in Stormlight that people for a while were shipping, and they're not even together. And nothing physical ever really happened with them, and they had more chemistry to me than these other characters sometimes. But on top of that, there's a side character who's the sweetest side character ever. And they sort of kind of have a romance in book 2, and it's the most, I just love it so much, and it's so heartbreaking. So I'm with the majority of you. Mistborn wins, in my opinion, but I think I should have won by more. This next one says, which one has better friendships? 29% said Mistborn, and then 71% said Stormlight. So another question I asked is, I think it goes hand in hand, so I want to bring this one up too, is would you rather be a part of the crew in Mistborn, or would you rather be involved with Bridge 4's friendship group? I specified too. You do not have to run bridges to be in this group. You can just be pals with the Bridge 4 gang. And the reason I think these go hand in hand is because I think these are the friendships we think of when we think of these characters. And you know, I might go against the grain a little bit here. I think the Bridge 4 friendships absolutely are the better of, as far as that group versus the crew in Mistborn. I love Bridge 4 so much. But one of my criticisms of Stormlight Archive is that the further into the series you go, and the more that we're dissecting individual characters, the less I feel like we see these characters actually interacting with each other. It's like we laid that foundation in the beginning, and that's one of my favorite things about Stormlight. And then as we go, I want to see these relationships continue to build, and I want to see these characters interact more. And I think this is just a drawback of having epic fantasy that is so epic, is that there's so much going on, the world's so big, the characters have to be separated, and they all kind of go on their individual missions, and everybody kind of knows each other, so there's just not that same feeling of getting to know each other. And with Mistborn, I think a constant struggle for especially Vin is learning to trust those around her, and so that trust is having to constantly be rebuilt in a sense, or at least built upon. And so I feel like there's more effort to get close to the characters. I would say in the first book, the side characters are kind of surface level, and then you get to know them more in book 2, and then in book 3 they're like main characters almost to some degree. The reason I think Stormlight wins when it comes to better MCs, better main characters, is because we spend so much time with the individual, and I want more of that Bridge 4 feeling extending into other relationships. This brings me into the next question, is which book has better side characters? 30% said Mistborn, 70% said Stormlight. And I think there's just so many characters in Stormlight, because what do you even consider a side character? Do you consider Adolin a side character, or do you consider Adolin a main character? Do you consider Yasna kind of main character or side character? Because those characters are more important than someone like Rock, who everybody loves Rock. But I would say that those characters are more notable, so then there's like different levels of side characters in Stormlight. Whereas in Mistborn, it's like you have Vin, you have Kelsier, and then you've got Breeze, and then you've got Sazed, and then you've got Ham. And I think Stormlight wins purely because the side characters in Mistborn, while they do get expanded upon, I still think they're a little bit more character types, like they're more tropey to me, and I think that the characters in Stormlight feel less so that way. This next question, I said I want to avoid spoilers here, but would you rather have the dog companion from Mistborn or a spren like Syl and Pattern? So the difficult part about this one is that we get to see all sorts of different kinds of spren, whereas we don't see all different kinds of the dog character in Mistborn. But I mean, Syl's cute and all, but I don't know, man. The character in Mistborn, I think I have to go Mistborn on this one. I am biased because I love my doggy, and I would love it if I had like a dog companion. But spren are like always there. They're like always there, you know? And sometimes I'd be like, I mean, they can go do their own thing, kind of, sort of. But I don't know that I could handle that. You know, I don't know if I can handle that. Especially if they're constantly needing to be taught, in a sense. Like, what's this? Explain this to me. I wouldn't want to do that all the time. I wouldn't want to have to explain everything to his friend all the time. They're cute. I like Syl a lot. I like Pattern a lot. My husband loves Pattern. He thinks Pattern is the best. So actually, I kind of want to know, do you like Syl or Pattern more? But anyway, I think I'd have to go with the other one because it would feel more like we're on equal ground. The next one says, which series has better antagonists? 31% said Mistborn, 69% said Stormlight Archive. There is a reason. I can't say the meme because I don't want to spoil for people who haven't read far enough. But there's a reason that people say so-and-so did nothing wrong, and nobody says that about anybody in Mistborn. So I think that already illustrates that there's more complexity to the villains. There's one particular villain in Stormlight Archive who I just wanted to die for so long, but they're so sneaky that they figure out a way all the time. You're like, surely there's no way they can get out of this. And then they do, and you're like, gosh darn it. And then there's another character. I'm so sorry. If you're watching this and you haven't read Mistborn or Stormlight, you've got to be confused, I would think. But anyway, there's another antagonist in Stormlight Archive that, I mean, you don't even realize they're an antagonist first. And then the more you get to know them, the more you're like, wow, this is one of the most fascinating villains I've ever seen. And also, I get upset, as Sanderson, for making me care about this villain so much, because I do, whenever they're kind of weak and not as capable. I'm always like, oh man, this is bumming me out. And then in Mistborn, you have this kind of far away antagonist, which I think makes for a little bit of a mystery, but it doesn't make for, I mean, I'm not like, yeah, I can't wait till we get that guy. And then in the second book, I did have the I can't wait till we get that guy sort of feeling. Second book, the way that the antagonist arc goes, I would say is, I liked it more than the antagonist arc in the first book. And then in the third one, it once again becomes, I feel like, more the mystery factor. So I think I'm with all of you. I think Stormlight's villains they're not just good for Mistborn versus Stormlight. I think they're just some of the best in fantasy. I love them. That is it for part 1 of Stormlight Archive versus Mistborn, the character-specific portion of this. I would love to know all of your thoughts. I would love to see when you disagree. I would love if you included other thoughts for questions I didn't even ask. Also, please, of course, remember that not everybody watching this has read the books, so if you want to chat spoilers, just write spoilers in your comment and enter a bunch of times. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.